Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's planning meeting. My name's Councillor White and I'm the chairman. On my left is the vice chairman, Councillor Heaney. The other councillors who are on the side tables are the ones that will be debating tonight and voting on the application. On my left and right are TDC officers, including Head of Planning and the TDC solicitor. This is a formal committee meeting, and it's important that the councillors can hear both the presentations and the debate, and therefore I would ask that you do remain quiet and not interrupt the speakers. Now, some of you have been to these meetings before, and there is a laid down procedure, and the procedure is the officer will give a presentation on each application, and then if anybody has indicated that they wish to enter the public speaking, I would take those. Then we would have any comments from the officer, and the committee members will ask questions, debate and finally vote. And I would say that this application is being recorded by the council. So that's my welcome. There are one or two little announcements from the agenda before we start, and that is the application, which is A3 for Threshers, Colchester Road, Ardleigh, application 1701925, has been withdrawn at the very last minute. As a matter as half an hour ago, I understand, so that will no longer be on the agenda tonight. The first application in front of you is the Ardleigh Squash and Leisure Club. This is an application which was deferred, and therefore there will be no public speaking on that one either. So with those two announcements, I will go back onto the agenda and ask for apologies for absence and any substitutions.
Thank you, Chairman. There are no apologies for absence. However, Councillor Mike Brown will not be sitting on committee tonight as he did not attend the site visits. However, you've probably noticed he is sitting in the public gallery. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. In which case, councillors, ask you to look at the minutes of the last meeting that was on Wednesday, January the 3rd. Are there any errors, omissions or anything else you wish to draw to my attention? Or alternatively, can I sign them as a true and correct record? Right, and that gets nods all the way round. Right, thank you very much for that. I will do so. Now then, the minutes are done, so the declarations of interest. Anybody? Yes, Councillor McWilliams.
Just a couple, thank you, Chairman. Just to point out that under my portfolio as a Cabinet member, the Community Asset Register comes under that portfolio, but I am not predetermined, so I shall be able to sit in on that one. Regarding the next one, which is the Great Bentley application, I will do what I did previously. I will not sit in or take a vote or anything, but I would like to just speak at the beginning of it, please.
Right, thank you very much. No other declarations. Right, in that case we move straight away on to item A1, the Ardleigh Squash and Leisure Club, and its planning application 1600878 full, and turn to Mr. Lang now to tell us all about this application.
Thank you, Chairman. As previously stated, this application was deferred on November the 30th, 2016 to allow for a further 6 months marketing campaign to be undertaken by the agent to encompass all commercial uses and not just leisure uses that were previously marketed. I'll just draw members' attention firstly to the update sheet, which provides a significant number of additional representations that have been received. 20 additional emails of objections from local residents concerning the closure of the facility, a letter of objection from Ardleigh Fallouts Group with concerns in respect to the marketing campaign and the current condition of the facility, and a response from the agent in respect of the marketing campaign being agreed by Tenham District Council and in respect of repairs that have been undertaken during recent years. And there's a further representation from Tendon Ramblers. In respect to the marketing campaign, or the revised marketing campaign we've received, I'll come on to that in a bit later. Due to the 14 months since it's been deferred, I'll just remind members of the application itself. So it was the demolition of the existing squash buildings and the construction of 7 4-bedroom detached houses and associated garages, which also includes a diversion of an existing footpath that runs through the site. The application site is located at the northern end of Ardleigh village. It's within the settlement boundary and the conservation area of Ardleigh, and it encompasses an area of land which is safeguarded for recreational use in the emerging and save local plans. To the west of the property is a commercial building, along with to the north. To the south is a recently constructed residential development, which also previously formed part of the site. And to the east are further residential properties that stretch down the street to the south. As you can see from the aerial images, to the south of the site are tennis courts and a car parking area. The buildings are located to the north. The 2 buildings incorporate a flat roof 70s squash style building and a more historic outbuilding previously to Ardleigh Hall, which accommodates the function rooms and a covered swimming pool to the rear. A small single-storey element to the north of the site that fronts onto the Dedham Road will be retained as part of the proposals, and there's a number of mature trees at the front of the site. Please note this aerial image doesn't show the recently constructed development to the south. So a photo of the site frontage from Dedham Road. You can see the flat roof 70s squash building there. If you look in west down Dedham Road, you can see the courthouse or the coach house just behind the trees there. If you look in northwest, you can see the single-storey element that's to be retained as the conservation area appraisal for Ardleigh confirms that's an important entrance to the village. If you look in southeast back towards Ardleigh village, a photograph of the squash courts from the existing access. Photograph of the front of the coach house, which is considered to be recently altered. The ground floor element is largely original. The first floor has been altered significantly, thought to be in the late 70s. That's a photograph of where the squash courts and the coach house actually join together. A photo of the southern boundary showing the recently constructed development. And a view the rest of the development to the south. You can see the car parking area in the foreground and tennis courts in front of the properties. Some internal photographs. This is the bar area, the covered pool area. There's been some recent damage to the roof due to recent storms, and the dance studio and squash courts, which are considered to be in reasonable condition. And a further photograph of the development to the south from the site access. So the site layout shows 2 pockets of development. The northern element will be arranged in a mews-style arrangement, serving 3 properties. And to the south is a more formal private drive, incorporating the diverted public footpath along a bollarded footpath within the actual drive. The layout shows each property will be served by ample amenity space, retain sufficient space into its side boundaries, and be served by 2 parking spaces each. The development would also make use of the 2 existing vehicular access onto the site. To the south, you can see ample distance has been left to the existing properties, and the properties have been designed to ensure there's no overlooking or loss of light to those existing residents. The majority of the mature trees to the front of the site, those with the most amenity value, are to be retained and supplemented by metal railings and additional planting to help the development assimilate into its surroundings. So the elevations of the properties, traditional style dwellings to replicate really those approved to the south, a mixture of render, cladding and brick with clay tiles. Features such as exposed rafters under the eaves, brick plinths and bay windows to add interest. And as you can see, plot 6 incorporates that retained single-storey element which will house a dining room. And that's considered to be important in terms of the heritage side of the application. And plot 7. It's a landscaping and tree protection plan which our tree officer has reviewed and has confirmed he's happy that the proposals that the tree protection measures they're proposing will sufficiently retain the most valuable trees present on the site frontage and to the rear of the approved development to the south. And the footpath diversion plan, you can just about make out the existing path of the footpath, and that will now be along the private drive. And the Ramblers Association have confirmed that they're happy with that, providing the order secured prior to the development being commenced. So in terms of the layout, members previously didn't express any concerns with regards to the design or the layout of the properties. Sufficient sensitive boundary treatment is proposed within the private drive. A mixture of wattle, fencing and hedging will help provide a softened entrance into the development. And highways have no objections to the use of the existing accesses, and if anything, the development may result in lower traffic movements than its use as a leisure facility. In terms of ecology, the 2015 survey has been updated and reflects the findings of that survey and requests slight mitigation measures in terms of the demolition of the buildings. No protected species were found, but that will be secured via condition. As I said before, the Rambler Society have got no concerns with the diversion of the footpath, providing appropriate signage is erected beforehand. So turning to the matter of the marketing campaign, the reason the application was deferred previously. As I stated, the application was deferred and an updated marketing campaign has been submitted which comprised of the following. Updated details to show the property being suitable for a range of commercial uses subject to planning consent, and that's shown on the slide up there. The existing advertisement boards on site to be changed to reflect the same. The revised details being put both onto the estate agent's clearinghouse and CoStar website, which all commercial major agents have access to. And all revised marketing details were resent to those who previously expressed an interest. Also, approaches to Tendering's Leisure Services Department and Ardleigh Parish Council were sent to see if they had any ideas or proposals for the property. Along with the additional marketing details, information was provided in respect of the quoting rent of £45,000 per year. The information provided states that this equates to £3.30 per square foot, and this does not include the outside tennis courts and the parking area. The information from our council's assets team suggests this value is comparable to the council's charges for sports and recreational facilities within the district. However, it must be noted at this stage that the assets team had not undertaken a full review of the condition of the facilities in question, and this information was provided a year ago, so that information may be slightly different now. Correspondence from council's leisure team and Ardleigh Parish Council has confirmed that both, whilst against the loss of the recreational or community facility, have no plans to either lease or purchase the property at this time. So as a result of the extended marketing campaign, the applicants received 4 new inquiries of interest. 3 of these backed out early upon viewing the premises and not being able to commit to a viable business plan. In particular, there was interest for someone who wished to run a therapy farm for dogs together with a cafe. However, upon viewing the property twice, he confirmed he was unable to come up with a viable business plan, showing the sources of funding required to convert and run the property. Further correspondence from another businessman who wished to see the use of use the premises for leisure purposes again confirms that due to the competitive nature of the leisure market and high initial start-up costs, their return would be slow and difficult to support a team of staff. More recent and more sustained interest has been expressed from a local gentleman who wishes to utilise the premises and land for health and fitness, sporting, spa, social and business activities. This interest has since led to viewings of the premises and the submission of a business plan outlining the business proposals, products and services, start-up costs, marketing campaign, marketing plan and backup plan. It was evidence that the business plan provided contained several errors and gaps in respect to the figures and failed to take into account landlord rent, salaries above the minimum wage threshold and other critical costs involved in the operation of the business, including insurance, repairs, accountancy costs and swimming pool running costs. Consequently, it is concluded that the cash flow information provided would need to be rewritten, and since then further information from the interested party has been sparse and 2 deadlines to commit to the lease have been missed. The period of interest from this inquiry has covered 8 months, and during this time no viable proposals from the prospective leaseholder have been received. Shortly before tonight's meeting, an email from the interested party has stated that he has obtained a business loan of £25,000 to cover initial costs, including the required £13,500 deposit. However, he has confirmed that a significant amount of additional funding is still required to cover start-up costs, repair to the building and a refit. The loan amount obtained is therefore not considered to be sufficient to materially alter the Council's view that no viable business model has been received. Consequently, from the information provided, it's concluded that on balance there is no reasonable prospect of a commercial or leisure use returning to the site. A sustained and ultimately unsuccessful marketing campaign has been undertaken, and clear evidence of the losses accrued by the previous operators have been submitted. This information is considered to be robust, and when having regard to the policy criteria for the loss of recreational facilities and green infrastructure, it's considered to adequately demonstrate there is no longer a financial need for the leisure use in this location. In conclusion, a settlement the size of Ardleigh is not considered to be of sufficient size to financially sustain a facility of this scale. The provision of modern, all-encompassing leisure and commercial facilities present in larger nearby settlements such as Colchester has taken potential customers away, and this is reflected in the lack of viable interest generated by the marketing campaign. Therefore, on the basis of the information provided to date, it's considered that on balance the redevelopment of the site for residential purposes would be acceptable and meet the requirements of the policy criteria. The application is therefore recommended for approval.
Right, lots of information there, councillors. Now, I did say that we've got no public speaking as such on it, and there are 2 councillors amongst us who actually weren't here at the time when we went on the site visit. And it's not fair, therefore, that they should contribute to voting at the end. Remind you, it's councillors Alexander and Cawthorne. So when we get to that point, I'm afraid you 2 gents won't be able to vote on it. I am reminded, and not take part in the debate either. So, right. So, councillors, it's straight over to you. We saw the site again, most of us, for the second time today, and we have heard the examples of the marketing that have attempted to take place. So, I'm over in your hands.
Councillor Everett.
Yes, Councillor Everett.
I'll kick off. Can you explain to me, because I'm slightly confused by the whole thing, what is the exact requirement that we have to have in relation to marketing effort? Does it mean it needs to be just advertised and that's the end of it? Or does it mean that we have to have something that is substantial that could then move forward? What exactly is it that we have to have?
So the policy requires that the loss of the facility is acceptable, providing it can be proven it's no longer viable or no longer in demand. So that's usually through the submission of a marketing campaign agreed with officers beforehand. That usually is a 1-year period. And throughout the process of the marketing campaign, updates from the agent are required. So any information in respect of expresses of interest and reasons as to why they are no longer, or that they backed out maybe, or the information they provided is not viable. And in this case, officers agreed the standard of the marketing, the time period. Obviously, the marketing for this particular proposal has obviously gone over that year. It's been longer than a year. And in officers' view, the information provided, there's been no viable offers to commit to a viable lease. So in our view, we've agreed the marketing campaign initially at the outset, and there's been no information to prove that there's a viable prospective leaseholder out there.
Yes, Councillor.
If I can come back on that. So you used the term expression of interest. Surely there is an expression of interest that is currently in the offing. And so therefore, are we in a position that we can say there is no viable hope of moving this forward?
I would say that the interest that's been expressed at the current stage hasn't proven that it's viable. The business plan provided, there was significant gaps within the figures provided, and the email received just prior to the meeting confirmed that additional funding would be required to start up the actual business hopes of the inquirer. The £25,000 loan he's obtained isn't considered to be sufficient to prove, or start-up costs to prove that it would actually be a viable business. One of the interested inquiries did quote a figure of 150,000 would be reasonable in terms of start-up costs to refit the premises out to make it competitive with other leisure uses in the local area. So in officers' view, there hasn't been any evidence, information provided which shows there is a viable leaseholder proposal on the table, basically.
Right, Councillor Benison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about leaseholders, and we're talking about this marketing campaign to let. And when we went there this morning, there was a to let sign out. Are we only looking at letting, or has any consideration been given to selling the property? They might have more interested parties if this site was put on the open market. And since it's been closed, it's fallen into a state of disrepair, which makes it less likely that people will want to let it because of the amount of money that they will have to spend to bring it back up to the condition that it was in. So my question is, have any attempts been made to sell the property rather than just lease it?
To my knowledge, it's just been leasing at this stage. I look to the developer who could maybe advise that it's purely been to let at this stage. There's been no attempts to sell the property.
Yes, come back.
Thank you. When we deferred this in November 2016, it was to allow the owner to produce a marketing campaign. If it's just being put up for letting, that doesn't, in my opinion, merit a full, robust marketing campaign. Do you have any comment on that?
Sorry, I asked them if you don't mind, if they're going to say something about
I would say that the council's own guidance within the Appendix 3 of the local plan doesn't specify whether it has to be for sale or to let. So, providing that the property has been offered in a way to let or to sale, it meets the requirements of the guidance within Appendix 3.
Yes, Councillor Benson again.
Thank you. Refer back to the November 2016 meeting when the committee asked for the owners to go away and to enable a robust marketing strategy, and that doesn't appear to me to have taken place. If it's only being offered for lease and not for marketing, you get a totally different customer, for want of a better word, who would come forward to look at these premises. Some people aren't interested in just renting. They would be looking at actually buying the building to develop it properly.
Right. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. A number of questions, actually, and I'm just trying to find the first one that I had. With regard to the business plan that you say has got several errors, this is on page 12, 1.14, in respect of the figures provided and everything else. Was that independently scrutinised, or was that done by officers? So I do recall we had, well, it wouldn't be similar because it was a huge development, but that was independently verified as to whether the business plan and the viability went forward. And secondly, with regard to the regeneration team comment on page 16, is that comment from 2016 or is that recent? And I noticed that the representations on pages 17 and 18 from Ardleigh Parish Council, the first one that I've highlighted is there's been no consultation with the Parish Council to assist in finding a purchaser, and 2 interested parties who produced viable business plans were turned down. If we've got any details of those. And then again, page 18, the Ardleigh Fallouts Group, they also state that no meaningful consultation with Ardleigh Parish Council has taken place. And they mention, within objections, it's mentioned about a consortium is interested in acquiring the club. I'm just wondering if you have any comments about that. And I think those are the only questions I have at the moment, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, in respect to the business plan that was provided, that hasn't been independently assessed. In officers' view, it was clear that there were significant gaps that didn't need expertise to review that in terms of salary and rental being left out. The regeneration comments, they were from July time when the 6 months had expired. So they were requesting further time to allow one of the interested parties extra time, and that is the interested party that is still providing information just before the meeting tonight. The Ardleigh Parish Council comments are from 2016, so that was when originally the application came before committee. So I haven't got any information in respect of the viable business plans they mention, and we haven't received any information from Ardleigh Parish Council in that respect. And they're clearly not interested in it in any significant way anymore, because we would have heard more from those parties, I believe. And Ardleigh Fallouts Group, again, I've had no evidence of a consortium, no further evidence of that provided. It's just the sole interested party that is on the table at the moment.
Chairman, can I just come back?
Please
just to
do.
clarify?
Yep.
So the are the comments from the Ardleigh Fallouts Group from the same as the Parish Council 2016 when this was first before us?
Yes, that's correct, yeah. Their updated comments are on the update sheet.
One more, Chairman, if I may. In the conditions, obviously the recommendation is to approve, but in the conditions you've got 22 and there's nothing there. Is that just, do we ignore that?
Yeah, that's just an oversight where it's on people's turn.
Yes. Councillor Hibby.
The trouble with this, buildings of community asset are usually put up for sale, i.e. the pub in Great Bromley and the other, the pub in, I think it's Great Oakley, isn't it? The Maybush is a community asset, and that's being run by the community. I was very much in two minds about this, but when we were emailed this evening late with the business plan of the person who wants to buy it or not, wants to rent it, I can just see straight away that that's not viable. He doesn't have enough money. This is a repairing lease that's being put up, and it's going to cost thousands and thousands of pounds. He's asking for grants. He's asking it for support from tendering, and that just can't, tendering's not going to support it. I'm very, very sorry about this because it was really was a building of community asset. It was very well used. It may have been used less in the last few years, but I have to say that people who wanted to use it found the tennis courts locked and things like that, so that hardly went down well in the community. But I really don't see what can be done about this unless it's sold. And then, if it was sold, then people wouldn't mind putting their money into it. But as it is at the moment now, you need well over thousands and thousands of pounds to put it up if it's not going to be repaired by the people who own it, the applicant really, and they're only, obviously, repeating myself again, putting it up on a repairing lease. So, thank you.
Right. Further questions? Councillor Everett.
Thank you. At the previous meeting, when we originally deferred this, I brought two aspects that I had concerns about. One of which relates to ecology, and the other one of which related to footpath diversion. Firstly, the footpath diversion. I'd like to commend officers and the applicant for actually doing the job properly. I was really, really pleased to see the detail on this, and I think both the applicant and the officers should be commended for that. I don't have any concerns about the footpath diversion anymore. It needs to go through the normal process, etc., etc. The other concern I had was relating to ecology, and particularly that of bats in this particular case. I'm not clear because I haven't been able to get to the data over the weekend because of the problem with the system that we have. Have we got a mitigation statement from the applicant? And if so, what does that say, please?
Yeah, the ecology survey previously was out of date because it was obviously deferred 14 months ago, so a further ecological assessment or a walkover survey was undertaken in January. Again, that found no evidence of bats utilising the site or any other protected species. The mitigation measures outlined state a soft strip of the building, a hand demolition, and if any bats are found at any time, cease work. And obviously have to obtain a protected species licence from Natural England. So that's all secured as part of the condition recommendation.
Thank you. No further speakers? Yes. Councillor McWilliams.
If I can, please, Chairman, I just want to get something very clear in my mind because, strictly speaking, we actually asked for this to be deferred for that period of time, and there's been that much longer in which to see how this has all come about. But are we really now looking at the plan that is in front of us for the actual design, etc., of the actual planning application? Are we putting what has gone on prior to this, our deferment, that's to a side now, and we're just looking at the planning application? Can somebody just put that clear in my mind, please?
Yes, so we're looking at the whole application. Obviously, it was deferred for an extended time of marketing, but you're looking at the whole merits of the application.
Yeah. Councillor
Just
McWilliams.
to confirm with Matt, please, if that's okay. We're just looking at that. We're not looking at anything else now. We're not looking at the the format of having gone through the 6 months that we asked for it to be deferred. We're not looking at that side of it now, but we're really looking at that.
Yeah, you are looking at the aspects of the marketing campaign and considering whether you feel that what's been provided is sufficient to prove it's no longer. Well, the Com 10 actually states no longer it's surplus to requirements. So, in officers' view, the lack of a viable business model being proposed, in our view, suggests it's surplus to requirements.
I've got another speaker now, but I'm just going to put my 2 pence in for what it's worth. Not only at the last time was I hoping that we'd get the financial side sorted out, but I was worried, along with the leisure section, about the loss of 4 more courts for squash. Because of somewhere I was at the weekend, where I found out that actually at the university, which is only some 3-4 miles away, they now have 20 squash courts in the new centre, and that get hardly or very limited use certainly during the week, and even at the weekends, it's quite easy to get a court. So my fears, when it came originally to us, I didn't want to see the loss of the squash courts, but I think that has largely been overcome now. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, I was going to say about the University of Essex has just opened, but 25, 30 years ago, Ardleigh Squash Club was world renowned. Everybody knew that it existed. We lost one in Clacton, Jaywick, a little while ago. I'm not saying the sport is taking a back seat, but I think the officers and everybody involved in it's done very well on what they've been doing in the last 13, 14 months. Yeah. And I propose that we accept this.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, I will note that that's your make a proposal. Councillor Heaney.
My question was, I think you have answered this, but I want to just get it clear in my mind. When we asked it to be marketed, it doesn't have to be marketed for sale. The council can't say that it should be put for sale, and if the applicant chooses to just market it for let, they're entitled to do that. Letting, I mean.
Yes, there's no explicit requirement in the appendix to have it for sale, so to let is acceptable from our point of view.
Thank you.
Right. Further speakers? No further speakers, in which case I have a proposal for acceptance of this application in front of me. Do I have a seconder for that motion? I do. Councillor Fowler. Now, do you wish to further debate this? I'm getting nods all the way round, so in that case, the proposal in front of you is for acceptance of this application with the 21 conditions that is in front of you on page 11. So those that can vote know what they're voting for. Those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those against?
And I'm abstaining.
1 against and 1 abstained. That application is approved. Thank you very much.
Can't bear to vote for it, and I know damn well how they've run it down.
Yeah. Right, we now move to A2, which is planning application 1701759, which is a detailed application, land west of Heckfords Road, Great Bentley. You will remember that we originally refused it, and I think I'm right in saying the inspector granted it. So this is the detail of that particular application. Suzanne, please.
Okay, so this is an application, or it's a reserved matters application for the erection of 49 dwellings. The details of access were approved at outline stage, which the outline permission was granted at appeal and granted permission for up to 50 dwellings. I'd like to refer members to the update sheet, which refers to amended plans that were received and a further letter of objection. So the plans to show you are those that are amended. So the site is outlined in red, and it lies to the north of the village of Great Bentley. It extends to around 2.42 hectares, with the majority of the site being a relatively flat arable agricultural field. And this shows it in aerial view. So you've got the more recent development at Storrick's Farm. The application site, which, as you would have seen from site visit, is bounded by hedgerow on 3 of the boundaries, with no delineation to the north. You've got a public footpath that runs through the site along the boundary of the properties in Finch Close. And you've also got surrounding development, which is a note on this application site on the opposite side of the road. So this is a site that you've seen this morning. These are the view of the southern boundary. In the design and access statement, it was incorrectly stated that all these properties are 2-storey, but as you would have seen from the photograph and your site visit, there is a mixture, with the predominantly being single-storey in height. That's the opposite boundary, so that's looking towards the western boundary. And again, you've got predominantly 2-storey dwellings, apart from a bungalow, which is situated in the corner of the site. And that's looking towards the eastern boundary. So you've got the hedge, the road, and the properties on the opposite side of Heckfords Road. And again, that's the hedge along the eastern boundary, and looking towards the southern boundary of the site, which is only partly delineated at present. So this shows the application site in context of the village of Great Bentley. Given the decision of the outline appeal, the application is now within the draft settlement boundary, and it also lies adjacent to the conservation area, which is the purple line shown on that. So there is a shared boundary with the conservation area. So as I mentioned before, outline planning permission was granted appeal, and it was subject to a number of conditions, one stating that the proposal should be in general conformity with this plan. And this shows access point, a footpath linked to the green, an area of open space to the front of the site, a lower density of development around the corner, and then residential development on the remainder of the site. So this shows the proposed development, and it shows you've got an area of open space at the front of the site, which is not, as members will pick up, not exactly as shown, but it is in general conformity. And it shows 49 dwellings with a mixture of 3, 4 and 5 bedroom properties, and a mixture of 2 and 2.5-storey dwellings. The footpath is to be retained and improved along the southern boundary, and the hedgerow along existing hedgerow along all boundaries is to be retained and strengthened along the southern boundary where required. The parking provision is slightly in excess of the required standards, so adequate parking is provided. And in terms of garden sizes, all but 3 plots meet the standards. In terms of the relationship to the neighbouring properties, you've got the properties in Finch Close, which I've referred to previously. There is a distance from front and back in 25 metres, which is considered acceptable and in accordance with the recommendation of the Essex Design Guide, which sets out a back-to-back distance. The other neighbouring properties are those of Aubrey Close, which, as mentioned, are predominantly two-storey apart from number 24. Again, it's considered that there's sufficient distance from the back of these properties to avoid any significant overlooking. It is noted that these properties are closer, but it's a side elevation that would face onto those properties with no windows in those, so no direct overlooking will occur. In terms of the proposed materials, we haven't been provided with the exact details of the exact materials, but that can be secured by condition, and it shows that there's a suitable mix of materials used throughout the site. And these show the design. The design's considered acceptable. Different roof forms and heights provide visual interest and appropriate detailing, such as brick plinths. The surrounding area comprises of a mixture of type and styles of dwellings, all which are fairly traditional in appearance, and therefore these proposed dwellings are considered in keeping. There are some 2.5 stories dwellings proposed, so they will be taller than the others, but it will be seen against the backdrop of existing development and therefore considered acceptable. And this shows elevations of the street scene, and officers consider that acceptable, and the recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, in this case, I don't have a member of the public speaking in favour or against the application, and I'm going to ask Linda to come and speak. I'm going to say as ward member, because that way she gets 5 minutes instead of a parish council member.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, there's no reason why I'm sitting here saying you can't do this and you can't do that, because I wouldn't do that, because it's obviously all been agreed. But there are one or two little concerns, little bits of interest, and I believe Suzanne has pointed out one very obvious one that is actually concerning quite a few residents, and that is the gap to the front of the property. You showed a previous map just now how it's slanted through, exactly like that. The reason that was done, and it was explained quite clearly to us all at the time, was so that as you come out of the conservation area, which is on that bend there, that you would still be able to see a landscape view coming away from the village. And that was the whole idea of that. Whereas on the new one, you've got housing now that will block that view. It's just something that we rather felt as residents it should be still perhaps taken into consideration, if possible. If obviously we're not saying it has to be, but we would prefer to see it. The other concern is over the actual footpath. It's not very clear on there as to which side of the hedge that the footpath is going to be. It's either going to be on the inside where it does run round to the actual footpath, or the footway is on the actual Heckford Road. It's a bit difficult to judge as to where that is. And I don't think originally it was agreed that the footway should be actually on Heckford Road. It was agreed that it should be behind the hedge, if my memory serves me right at the time. So those are just two concerns there that I believe should be mentioned. There is a query over one of the paragraphs in the report, and that's on page 35, paragraph 6.13. And it's the last sentence in that paragraph, and it reads a little bit obscurely. It reads that it is therefore considered that the proposal would result in any adverse impact on the setting of the adjoining conservation area. Not sure what that actually means. Should it read that the proposal would result in an adverse impact on the setting or would not result in an adverse impact? That's a little query that I thought you'd like to be aware of. Regarding the bungalows in Finch Drive, I appreciate, yes, there's a fair distance between the bungalows and the new properties, but for the sake of moving, probably I think it's two-storey buildings, those bungalows could be saved from any adverse impact at all, if only they weren't there. Again, there is mention of bus service along Heckford Road. There is no such thing as a bus service along Heckford Road. In fact, it's many, 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 many years since there was a bus service there. It's only in the main part of the village that we do have a bus service. So I think that's something that is quite relevant, that it's saying that there is that there. Just finally, I mean, I'm just having a little list here. Do forgive me. But finally, just one point on page 34, paragraph 6.11. I'm a bit concerned that it looks as though Great Bromley is going to get £50,000 of our play equipment money. So perhaps that needs sort of sorting out. But I will leave you with those few thoughts. Okay? Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Now then, I'm not sure, Mr. Tedder, whether he would now like to come as the applicant. Welcome, sir, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Nigel Tedder and I represent Go Homes, the applicant. Our Reserve Matters application consists of 49 dwellings of 3, 4 and 5 bed designs. The design for the site follows the parameters set by the outline consent, granted at appeal, and provides a good level of soft landscaping. Public open space is provided to the site's frontage to act as a buffer, and we've also provided open space within the body of the site. The buildings are no taller than 9 metres, which is less than the 10 metres noted within the outline parameter plans. Some dwellings make use of the roof space for additional accommodation, but these are all contained within the loft level. The existing boundary hedging to the eastern and western boundaries is to be retained and additional planting provided. The public right-of-way to the southern boundary is to be widened and maintained during the development. The existing footpath runs to the south of that hedge, but our plan shows the improved footpath to the north, allowing that hedge to carry on growing and in effect fill the gap to the back boundaries with the Finch Close properties. A new footpath along the site's frontage with Heckfords Road is to be provided, and this is planned to be inside the existing hedge line. The eastern element of the site is provided as public open space to ensure no harm to the adjacent conservation area. We would suggest that the report is missing the word not, but we'll wait for officers to comment. Yeah. The buildings proposed are traditional in appearance and provide an interesting and varied street scene, not dominated by drives and garages. The design ensures no adverse impact on the privacy levels of neighbouring properties. Just coming back on the ward members' comment, so yes, there's a change to the POS to the site's frontage, but we've also brought some open space within to the body of the development and feel that has followed the parameter plan set at the outline stage. And just clarifying, the hedge to the northern side is inside, the eastern side is inside the Heckford Road hedge, which I feel would block any view as you leave Great Bentley to the skewed POS that was discussed. In summary, our proposals respond positively to the outline approval. We would ask members to support our application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Right, councillors, it's your chance. Right. Whilst Councillor Heaney will be the principal speaker, I'm just going to ask a question. The adjacent planning permission on the field to the east of this, north of Moores Close. I'm certain in my own mind that planning permission was granted for that only on the grounds that the footpath from people from that estate could walk to the green on a footpath in part of this application. Now, perhaps the officer, while she's searching for that, can have a look. She's probably got something that will show me that it still can be done, even though it's inside the hedge line on this property. Right. You want to fire away on that one straight away, right?
I think it'll be useful if I just clarify the position of the footpath at this stage to try and clear this up. So the outline application for this development site, which is under consideration, was granted at appeal, and it was granted subject to a condition that says the site access and footpath should be in accordance with a plan that was submitted, with the exception of the section of footway south of the priority junction, which is this section that shall be situated immediately adjacent to Heckfords Road carriageway. So the inspector considered that the footpath had to be adjacent to the road, and that is provision shown there for that said footpath. There is also another footpath within the site that would link, so there's potentially two ways of footpath access along there. And in respect to the development on the opposite side of the road, Councillor White is correct in saying that that was also granted with an access point approximately in this location for there, and then with a footpath that came slightly over and then crossed the road, and that application was also subject to a condition that had a footpath running all the way along here. So the situation is that you've got two permissions which are not allowed to be occupied until this footpath along here is provided. So it's whoever comes first, really, and wants to occupy those dwellings. If this site comes first, they will need to provide a footpath all the way along there. If this site comes first, then they're required just to provide a footpath along this section, because there's limited use with the footpath going to the north that would actually lead to nothing. So the footpath will be provided, and that's part of conditions on both consents. And just to clarify, in the issues with the report, that paragraph 6.3 should be not, so there's not any harm to the conservation area, and the financial contribution towards open space is for Great Bentley.
That's a shame.
Great Bromley got very excited when they thought they were going to get some benefit for that. Right, Councillor Heaney.
I've got some questions. With the 2.5 stories, are they the windows, are they Velux or dormer? It was a bit hard to see. First of all, yes, can you... I've got several questions, or do you want me to ask at the end? Usually, that's one question. Usually in a development this size, can't speak tonight, there would be houses donated to the council. There's nothing here with that. There doesn't even seem to be much of a mention of low-cost housing. I mean, for instance, in the one in Alsford the other day, same number of houses, 3 houses were given to the council. And then, what else did I notice? And the other question is, when the outline plan went to the inspector, I know it was just an outline, but it went without the houses, shown or anything, but it did definitely have that slanted thing. So which the Bentley was very keen on, was that conservation, so they could look out of their conservation area into the open fields. Now that is just not going to happen because the size of the green has been totally knocked off at the top. Is the inspector, can the inspector do that, or showing the original slide you showed, which obviously came to us too and must have gone to the inspector, it's much more of a V shape. This is just a sort of straight up and down shape, but that was much more of a V. I think that's it, actually. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Everett.
Thank you. I'm slightly concerned about the hedge to the east and where or where not the footpath or footway will be, because it seems to me that we potentially have 2 footways either side of this hedge. What concerns me about the one that the inspector seems to prefer, which is the one adjacent to the carriageway, so therefore to the eastern side of the hedge. We have experience on another application where actually, even though inspectors thought it would be a good idea to do such, it wasn't actually implementable. So are we convinced that actually to have the footpath to the eastern side of this hedge would actually be implementable in the first place?
I thought the footpath was on the west end of the hedge. Surely that brown bit's the footpath, isn't it?
Yeah, I would think I'm going to come to Councillor Baker, but perhaps would you like to answer that point first before we go on?
Right, okay, so if I go through the questions that have been raised, in terms of the 2.5 storey properties, the most of them have just served by Velux windows, so I can't really see that plan. Yeah, so the majority of 2.5 storey, so these ones here, which are 2.5 storey, and those ones there, and these ones here are all served by purely Velux windows. You've got one here which has got Velux windows on the front and dormer windows to the rear, and these 2 here are the same, so it's Velux windows on the front and dormer windows to the back. In terms of affordable housing, that is secured through the outline permission and the legal agreement, so there will be affordable housing provided on site. In terms of the sort of open space and the slanted view, yes, that was shown at appeal stage, and the inspector did consider that would keep the views in and out of the conservation area, and it was subject to a condition to say that the reserved matters shall be in general conformity. So I suppose it's the definition of what general conformity means. Officers are of the view that that open space shown is sufficient to maintain views in and out of the conservation area. In terms of the hedge and the footpath, of whether that is implementable, that was all dealt with at outline consent, and at the appeal there was a lot of discussion about the width of that footpath and whether that was acceptable. So that was all dealt with at outline stage, so it's not a matter for consideration as part of this application. It is as what was allowed at appeal. And the hedge is shown as being retained along that boundary. So I think that's all the...
It's the brown bit, the footpath thing.
That is one of the footpaths within the site, and then you'll notice that there's an area of space that's shown as blank, and that is the footpath along there. It's not entirely clear by this, but it is...
So there's 2 footpaths?
Yes.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. It says in the executive summary that sustainable drainage is one of the conditions or one of the things that we should be considering. And I noticed that Essex County Council SUDS have made no comment, or we haven't received any. I'm just thinking where on the site is there going to be I don't know what you call it, a basin, swale, pond, as they describe it really, within the site, because when we were there this morning it seemed very damp and there was lots of water lying about, and I wouldn't do what I would normally do, but which properties don't meet policy with regard to their gardens? and what size of the properties are they? I appreciate that anything over 3-bed or over has to have 100 metres, but if we've got a 5-bed with less than that, I would be quite concerned. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Okay, so in terms of the drainage issues, Essex County Council have not commented on the application, but there is a reason for that. In terms of on the outline consent, they did do a strategy which was considered acceptable at that stage, and this application still enables that strategy to be carried out and doesn't affect any changes. And there is a condition on the outline consent which the inspector imposed, which states that no works shall take place until a detailed surface water strategy has been approved. And in terms of the properties that don't have sufficient open space, you've got plot number 30, which is that one there, and that has got 85, and then you've got, I'll check that for you. And then you've got plot number 5, which is this one here, and plot number 21. So I'll just check the... You might wish to continue on.
Yeah. Right. Well, while we're searching, I'm still unhappy with that front edge. I really am. We all want to see a hedge there. I think that's the problem. We don't want to see that ripped out. On the other hand, it's absolutely silly to have 2 footpaths, in that the one on the roadside edge will undoubtedly narrow the road on that very dangerous corner. And that does worry me, I must admit. So why we can't get something... if the 2 developers between them can't get together and agree who's paying for what, but inside the hedge line, it would seem to make sense. And I'm unhappy with that. Now, Councillor Heaney.
Well, I'm unhappy with it too. And also I'm unhappy because I was under the impression that they were going to go down, the footpath was going to go down past the Stepnet, or whatever it's called, that house, in the front of that house, round that corner, because that's where people are going to walk. They're not going to walk when they want to go to school, or the school, or get on the train, or whatever, they go to the doctor's surgery. They're not going to walk all the way down that path and come out of the bottom. They're going to continue walking round that corner, because that's what people do, and it's not big enough. And they were going to... we were absolutely adamant that they almost put a footpath in there. And that's what I was going to understand. You're going to have 2 developments. They're all going to be trogging around that corner on a bit of grass. And I don't think for a moment that they're going to go all the way down there and all the way around and come out and wherever it is that footpath comes out, because they're not going to do it, because that adds ages onto their walking, particularly if they're going to get on the train or something. They're just going to go across the green. That was one thing, which I'm very unhappy about. And then the other thing is that... I can't understand why there's no gifted houses. Affordable housing is such a woolly term. You know, what do they mean by affordable housing? Are they, what does it mean? It doesn't. Nothing in here is going to be really affordable. It's all going to be expensive houses. It's Great Bentley. It's near the train. Affordable housing, they're going to put slightly less expensive houses on, but I bet there's nothing under £300,000 on this development. So that's not affordable, is it? It'd be much better if they gifted us some houses, which is what usually happens on a development this size. So we can try and knock people off our housing register, and that makes me unhappy too. I think I've waffled on enough now, but anyway, thank you. Councillor Benison.
Councillor Benison, thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Right.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, Councillor Baker has asked two of my questions, so I won't ask those again. Suzanne mentioned the back-to-back housing and the being sufficient space. Does it make any difference that they're not back-to-back, they're back-to-front? We've got the frontages of the houses at the bottom of the site, looking straight into the gardens of the bungalows and houses that have been built on the adjacent site. And unfortunately, that's all I've got to ask now. Thank you, Councillor Baker.
Right, now, Suzanne, you've got a whole series of questions to answer, I think.
Yeah. So in terms of the issues raised about the footpath, just to remind members that access has been approved as part of the appeal, and so you're just considering the reserve matters, which does not include the footpath or the access. And in terms of affordable housing, again, that's the same issue. It was dealt with at outline stage, and there is a legal agreement to secure some form of affordable housing. And in terms of the as recent question, in terms of the front to back distance, that is addressed in paragraph 6.25 of the report, where it is noted that it is a front to back situation, and it's still officers' view that that is a sufficient distance. Oh, yeah, sorry. And in terms of garden sizes, so plot 30 is a 3-bed property with approximately 85 metres squared, and the other two are 4-bedroom properties with one that has approximately 92 metres squared and the other which has 90 metres squared.
Right. I haven't given up on this footpath yet. Are we saying that they were both subject to appeal? So the estate on the east is told by the inspector there's got to be a footpath on the roadway, and the inspector on the one we're considering now has also said there's got to be a footpath. Are we saying that?
Yes, so this application, which is to the west of Heckford Road, the inspector did say that there needs to be a footpath, and he did specifically say in his condition that it should be adjacent to Heckford Road carriageway, and that was the inspector's specific request and condition. So there is adequate space for that to be provided as part of this scheme. In terms of what went on the opposite side of the road, that was a committee decision. It wasn't an appeal decision.
Great, thank you.
And that, again, showed a plan that showed a footpath adjacent to the highway, which went all the way along there. And both of them, as mentioned, if one or the other development comes through, then the footpath will be provided.
Right.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, Councillor Heaney?
I know I'm banging on about this footpath, but it's a footpath to nowhere, that. What, a footpath to go in another sort of footpath, which is going to take you right round. The footpath stops in the most important place where it should go on around the road. It's meant to be a footpath down the road, and the fact it's not going to be that. It's not going to work, and
Right, Councillor. Yes, Everett. Councillor Everett.
I'd like to explore sightlines, please, from the conservation area to the open countryside. Clearly in the outline, there was an intention to give that sort of sightline. That appears not to be the case anymore. Is that in itself a possible justification for this committee to defer the application to allow discussion with the developers to find out whether they could actually rejig this to allow that, and at the same time to put clarity in terms of the footpath.
Right. Whilst we're thinking on that one, Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to clarify something I believe was said. Did I hear correctly in what you were saying about this footpath, that there are two developers we're looking at, thinking that I was not sitting at the original application to the development to the east? This is the first application I've seen of this kind before us. That whoever starts the work on the footpath, in effect, will be responsible for finishing that. Is that correct?
Right, so just to address the footpath issue, I feel it's slightly taken a diversion because it was decided as part of the outline. But basically, yeah, there is a footpath that's been approved that goes along Heckford Road, and it is a requirement of this development not to occupy until the southern part of this footpath is provided, and it is a condition of this consent here not to occupy until that footpath is provided. So it's not who starts building, it's whoever wishes to occupy the dwellings that are built first, and then that needs to be provided and completed prior to the first occupation of either of the dwellings.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Councillor Holmes.
Suzanne, have you got any aerial photos of that road on this? I think all this stemmed from a little jig point right in the middle of that bend there, right? And at the time we was all concerned about a footpath that wasn't going to be wide enough. There was discussions within the householder, I think it was Stennett's, I'm not sure. But it was agreed by the inspector that they do build one. We had then decided that we didn't want to see the hedge go. So it's when you look at the drawing of the one up before that, the one you had up there just a little while ago.
Sorry?
That's it. It's these two houses right at the end here, isn't it? I mean, that actually comes round the road. The footpath that we're talking about is not actually shown on there where everybody was concerned, because what happened after was that it's gone inside the hedge now, so they can have it as wide as they want, can't they? There's no problem with that. But it was the main sticking point was where them from the edge there. What was pointing up here?
Stennett's and
All that
Heath
little lone
something.
bush on the green. That's
Yes,
there.
that's it.
Now it comes down here. That's it. Well,
Yeah.
down there is where the pinch point
Yes.
was,
Yeah.
which is nothing to do with any of this planning.
No.
So
I think it's to do with the next one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
it's nothing to do with any of the plannings that was actually given by the inspector.
Okay, I think I'll try and...
Sorry.
Let me try and explain this again. So in terms of the outline consent, there was a requirement for the footpath to continue down here. That was part of the outline consent. It has been agreed, and you're right in saying that there was a lot of issue about the pinch point and the width of it. The inspector agreed that it was an acceptable footpath, and therefore that's been allowed and is done. It's not shown on this plan, but it's still a requirement for them to do it.
That's better.
Yeah.
That's better.
No,
Therefore, we're discussing nothing.
no, it's not part of this application. That's been
Is it part
decided
of the
and
other
done.
application?
Was it given on part of the?
Eastern.
It was the outline consent that gave it consent.
So the inspector passed it
Yes.
as is.
Yes.
So that's still there, and it still comes down.
It will be there and it will come down. It's
Okay.
not there
Thank
at
you very
present.
much.
So it will. What you're saying?
Can I just
Yeah, it
What
will.
you're saying, the footpath will go on then, past Stennis? Because any other one?
There's no footpath at the
There's no
present
footpath at
along
present.
the carriageway, as you'd seen from the site visit. There is no footpath there, but is a requirement before they occupy the dwellings to provide. The footpath in the site is not part of any of the inspector's requirement. It is developer's choice, and that was actually shown. As you see, there is a footpath shown on there to be within the site. So effectively, there will be two means of footpath access towards the village.
Yes.
But as I say, the footpath outside of the site is not part of this discussion. It's been decided.
It's agreed already, is it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's agreed as part of the outline consent.
Oh, so,
That overcomes your problem.
yeah, that comes over my complaint. But so what you're saying is a footpath going to come past Heatherdean and... Sorry. There's a footpath going to come past Heatherdean and Stennis, although it's not shown on this...
Yes.
Sorry. Oh, well, that's all right then.
Yep. Good. Right. Having established that, the nearest thing I got to a proposal is one that we deferred, but that was the nearest thing, and I don't think that was put forward. Councillor Holmes.
I propose that we agree to details. Yeah, I propose that we agree to details.
Right.
Chairman, I'll second that.
And Councillor Baker seconds it now. Now you've got the proposal in front of you. Anybody wish to add anything to that? No? In that case, I'll put that proposal to you. Those in favour of approving this detailed on the lines shown on what conditions have we got? We've got 5 conditions at the top and bottom of 28 and 29. And so that's all we've got to add to it at this stage. Those in favour, please show. Right, and those against, please show. And 1 abstention.
2 abstentions.
2 abstentions, I do beg
I'm
your
abstention.
In that
Because I
case,
don't like the shape they put in there.
yeah,
They said.
that's what it should be. In that case, it is approved. Thank you very much. We better get Linda back in case she's thinking of going home.
I must say, they put it in the vase shape. I wouldn't have a problem with it, but they said they would and they didn't. I mean, it's not worth voting against it because it's...
That does complete this evening's meeting. And those of you who thought that it would be before 7:30 are right. So thank you all very much.
Well, you thought it might go on for hours and hours. I would have gone for hours if that was the footpath. I could have gone for ages about the footpath, but I didn't realise it was there until
While I've got you all here, do mind that a list of the new training dates has been published today.
Hey, hang on, people. Shush, John wants to say something.
Just to remind you that the new list of training dates has gone out today. So,
Liz wants to say
yeah.
something.
Yes, Councillor.
Can I make a comment on that? We're told these are all compulsory. Shush. So, these new training dates are all compulsory. All the dates, I'm going to be away for one of them, and all the others, I've got other meetings booked.
Oh dear.
So, a bit of a quandary. It would have been nice to have had a bit of discussion about when people were available.
Yeah. The problem is when we have to pick those dates, we have to pick them when all the officers or speakers can make it available as well. But if it's really that bad, if you couldn't make virtually any of them, yeah. Well, we'll see if we can pick that up with personally for your good self, I think.
Picking up on that point, that wouldn't have been an issue before because there were no sanctions in terms of people that were members of the planning committee not attending a meeting. However, the new rules that we are putting through council at the moment rather indicate that there might be sanctions. So there is a bit more of a issue here of not attending than there was previously.
Yeah.
I have a problem because every one of them is great Bentley Parish Council meeting.
What day are they? I haven't looked at them. What days are they? Wednesdays, are they?
They're all Thursdays, I think, aren't they? Let's have a look.
I haven't had a look at them yet. It's really difficult, actually. Because we've got so many meetings in there. You can't make 6 parish council meetings. I wonder where you are.
Right.
So how do you come to the... Oh, I'm sorry, bang on. This is my big thing. Let me go into that corner. How come you are making that development?
Yeah. If we could start them at 6, what time's your Bentley Parish Council? Up at 7?
They are 6 o'clock, they're 6 till 8.
Or, if people could make it, we could start at 5:30 while the officers are still at work.
I wasn't involved at that stage. I think yeah, that would be lovely. Half an hour earlier start would be great.
It would, wouldn't it?
Yeah, if people can make that from work, then yeah.
I think.
Mike Brown not realised he had to get on the planning bus, do you think?
He wasn't on the bus.